is Jesus' Galilean ministry. Last week we looked at 1.0, so this week we're looking at 2.0. I intend to cover 4 distinct events out of the 250 that are there. So event number 33, which is fishing for the fishermen. Event number 34, which is Jesus the authoritative teacher. Event number 35, which is Jesus the compassionate healer. And finally, if time permits, we'll look at how the Galilee outreach is spreading, which is event number 36. Okay, so let me quickly, without wasting much time, kickstart this whole thing. Okay, so I've chosen particular passages from the Synoptic Gospels. Out of these 4 different episodes that we're going to look at today, several of these will fall under the category of being featured in parallelly other Gospels as well. So this event, Matthew 4:18 to 22, which is Jesus calling his first disciples who were fishermen, also occurs in Mark 1:16 to 20, but I have taken Matthew 4:18 to 22 as a text. And if somebody is interested, we can parallelly read also Mark 1:16 to 20 and see and fill in details if there are some extra ones. Okay. So this is how Matthew 4:18 to 22 goes. As Jesus was walking besides the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets, and followed him. 21, going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James the son of Zebedee and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father too, and followed him. Now, this is something that anybody that's grown in a church environment would have heard umpteen number of times, and this is an amazing passage. Oftentimes, this is quoted as a passage when the speaker is giving out a missionary call. If you ever went to revival meetings and meetings where the missionary call would be given to kind of encourage people to join mission organizations and take up the call of teaching and preaching the gospel, this is one text that is a go-to text for preachers. And it's very obvious why it's a go-to text. Now, I'd like to call this entire narrative as fishermen, because all of these 4 people that Jesus is calling in this narrative are fishermen. And Jesus, interestingly, is fishing fishermen. And then he will say, "I'm going to make you fishers of men." I think that is absolutely very, very creative on Jesus' part to say that. But before we come to that, let us also look at these 2 verses closely. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen, and he initiates the conversation. Now, Jesus is a conversationalist. We have seen the conversation he had with Nicodemus. We have seen the conversation that he had with the Samaritan woman. And here again, he is the one that's initiating the conversation. He's in fact calling them, and he's saying, "Come, follow me." He's not using names. And so I am assuming, reading between the lines, that he went perhaps up close to them and he directed his gaze and locked his gaze with their gaze, and then, without a doubt in the minds of who he was calling, he is saying without using names, come, follow me. A very, very simple invite. It's not a sales pitch. It's not something that is very dramatic. It's not a big preach. It's not a very emotionally drawn message of asking somebody to sign up for ministry, but it is something very, very simple, very beautiful. He says, come, follow me. Just 3 words, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. I think that's absolutely brilliant, that one line that he says as a call to missions to these two people, his first disciples, as it were. And it's important, as I've always been emphasizing, whenever there is the name of a particular biblical place that is dropped in our text, we need to really go to the maps and have a visual understanding of what's happening and where it is happening. So I've been telling repeatedly over the weeks, and by now I'm sure everybody that's a regular will know Judea is in the south. Samaria is sandwiched between Judea and Galilee. Galilee is in the north, and that's where the action is happening. That's where it happened last week, and that's the action that we are trying to capture this week as well. Okay, so Galilee is in the north, the uppermost. And specifically, the Sea of Galilee is what we are looking at today. And last week, we realized that Capernaum happened to be the headquarters of Jesus. Though Jesus was from Nazareth, later on, he would move from Nazareth and set up shop, as it were, in Capernaum. And that is where at least 4 of his first disciples came from. So this is another map that tells us Galilee was divided back in the day into Lower Galilee and Upper Galilee. Okay, and somebody had a question or a doubt. Just for clarity, I'm saying the Galilee back in Jesus's day was divided into Lower and Upper. Between the Lower Galilee and the Upper Galilee, there is a big valley geographically, and that's why it was divided like that. Upper Galilee is on an elevation, Lower Galilee is towards the valley. Okay, and if that's just a trivia for you to know. Now, Jesus' call is a very simple call, but it's a very interesting call. He doesn't use their personal names. Perhaps he's looking straight into their eye. He's gone up close to them and he's saying, come, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And that, I think, is a very beautiful way of inviting, very interesting, very brilliant, very creative. And what next happens has always baffled me, even as a young Christian, when I first encountered this text. And I found it very, very difficult to swallow, very difficult to understand. And parents would often tell us when we were growing up, your obedience has to be instant obedience, instant obedience. And we keep saying the same to our daughter, Michelle, and we say your obedience has to be instant obedience. But as we read verse number 20, it says, at once they left their nets and followed him. At once they left their nets and followed him. Now that's mind-boggling. That is very, very, very baffling for me to understand. Now, if somebody were to call me to a life of ministry, and they are telling me, leave all your calm danda, whatever you have been doing all this while, and then come and follow me in a complete way, in a full way, I would say, oh, I need time. I really need time. I really need to think about it. And if I want to spiritualize, I'll say I have to pray about it. If I'm married, I will say I have to discuss it with my family. And if I know for sure that I'm not really going to make any money out of this, it's going to be a life of faith. I'm really, really going to think hard. But I've always wondered how these two brothers at once are leaving their nests and they are following him. Uh, Almost like, as if it were so easy to follow Jesus. It's not like following Jesus on Instagram. This is serious stuff. They have to move on from whatever they were doing. We do not know the kind of contract that Jesus wants to, wants them to sign up. Or perhaps they were just thinking we're just following him for this little walk down the beach, and that's fine. But there is actually more to this, and I will kind of try and expound that in the next couple of slides. Now, this is what is happening in verse 21 and 22. Going on from there, he is seeing two other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them. That's all the gospel writers are saying about the call. And again, this is interesting. Immediately, now remember, this is not from Mark's gospel. Now, Mark is a big, fan of this word immediately. Immediately is one of the most common words that keeps popping up in the way Mark is writing his narrative. But here we are reading Matthew, and Matthew also seems to be catching that immediacy. Okay, and it says, and immediately they left the boat, and their father. That's important. That's interesting, and followed him. The first one baffled me a little bit. This one, makes me go bonkers. How can somebody immediately leave their boat, which is symbolic of their profession? That's their professional identity. These are fishermen, and their father, okay, and followed him. So business and family, work identity and family, commerce and family, earning and family. You can think of it in various ways, and it becomes more and more intriguing as to how these are instantly following Jesus. Now, there is a little bit of context that we need to understand when we want to really make sense of this insta following, as I'd like to call it. The Mishnah, which is a commentary, describes the educational process for a young Jewish boy in Jesus' time. We looked at it several weeks ago, and I will have a couple of slides as refreshers. This is what typically, at 5 years old, it is believed one is fit for getting exposed to the scriptures. At 10 years, the Mishnah says they are ready for learning the oral Torah, the Torah in an oral fashion, rote memory, and also getting exposed to a little bit of interpretations. At 13, they are ready for fulfilling the commandments that the Torah required. At 15, the Talmud, they got exposed to rabbinic interpretations. At 18, they were ready for the bride chamber, which is marriage. At 20, they were ready for pursuing a vocation. At 30, for authority to be able to teach others. So what's happening at 5 years and 10 years, 13, 15, 18, 20, and 30 is marked typically for an Orthodox Jewish child coming from a Jewish family. And so when Jesus is calling these men are already pursuing a vocation, and that is fishing. So these are not men in their early 18s, or these are not men that were unmarried. These are men that were pursuing a career. So obviously over 20, okay, married perhaps at this time. And so what typically happened is the student usually is the one that asks permission to follow a rabbi. And it is likely that most were turned away. If somebody wanted religious knowledge, if somebody wanted deeper spirituality, they would have to approach a rabbi and ask him for permission to follow this particular rabbi. And it is likely that most were turned away. Now, when somebody comes and asks a rabbi, like Jesus, can I follow you? The answer often is not an instant yes. The answer most often is a no. And so it was a great honor, you can imagine, to be accepted by a rabbi. And here in this case, what is happening is the rabbi is asking you to sign up in his school, as it were. So in the verse above, when Jesus asked Peter, Andrew, James, and John, all four of them to follow him, it is a very, very, very uncommon thing. And in the past weeks, we have seen how Jesus became popular down south at the festival in Jerusalem by performing signs and wonders. And already Jesus' reputation has preceded him into Galilee. And last week we saw how he had healed an official's son, and I called it as distant healing. Okay. And which is an unusual kind of healing, not an ordinary kind of, touch and heal, which itself. So here, Jesus' reputation is preceding him, and he is going to these four men, and instead of letting these four men, who perhaps are already rejects by other rabbis, I do not know that, I'm just assuming, he goes and he says, follow me. He doesn't have to say too much. He doesn't have to say, you know what, I'm having a ministry, I am a teacher, preacher, healer, prophet, king, I'm the Messiah. You know what, you remember the signs and wonders that I did down south in Jerusalem, and about a few days ago, something that I did here in Capernaum. Will you follow me? Will you sign up and, be my Talmidim, my disciple? No, he's just saying, follow me. That's the convention. That's the rabbinic convention. So it was a statement that clearly expressed in no few words that Jesus had confidence that they could be like him. Because when a rabbi chose a disciple or a Talmidim, the Talmidim had to become like the rabbi and conform to the rabbi's image, the imago rabbi, the image of the rabbi. Well, we don't know if any of them had sought out this honor previously of approaching a rabbi and perhaps getting rejected. The fact that Jesus came and asked itself is a grand thing. It's like somebody from, Yale or Harvard, or in our context, IITs or IIMs or Indian Institute of Science, or from the place that I am seated right now, CMC or VIP, coming and, saying, hey, I give you an admission in my university. Will you sign up? Will you come and join? It's a big honor. Okay. So think of Zebedee, the father, who seemingly had his boys abandon him. Okay, unless Zebedee was a terrible, terrible father, okay, James and John would not jump at this opportunity of deserting him and, saying, bye-bye, we're done with you and your, stinking business and we've got a better call and, see you later. No, Zebedee, there is no proof that Zebedee was such a terrible father. And there is no reason that these guys are excited to abandon him. But if these guys were abandoning Zebedee, quote unquote, Zebedee should have been disturbed by this action. Okay. But I suppose it gave him great pride to see not just one of his sons, but two of his boys chosen personally by a rabbi. And here in this case, this rabbi, Jesus, the one that is kicking up dust in Jerusalem and Judea, Samaria, and now in Galilee. Now we understand why, this come follow me and this instant following is perhaps, something that we can grapple with. So that's episode number 33. Now let's quickly move to episode 34. Now, episode 34 is also an interesting episode. This occurs in Mark. It also occurs in Luke. Now, I've chosen the Markan narrative. And if interested, we can go and look at the Lucan narrative as well, maybe during the Q&A, and try and glean if there are any additional points that the Markan narrative doesn't capture. Okay. Now, I've titled this as authoritative teacher, and that is what comes out of this beautiful narrative about 7-8 verses. So what's happening? They went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue, quote unquote, as was his custom, and began to teach. Now, the synagogue is the place where a lot of religious discussions happen. And therefore, by default, the synagogue is a place where a rabbi or where rabbis had to be. And if Jesus is this new rabbi in town and Jesus is beginning to teach and preach, definitely Jesus had to be in the synagogue because that's where everybody congregated, the ones that were interested in learning spiritual stuff. And therefore, Jesus, as it was his regular custom, like we saw last week, goes this week also into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. And he instantly, because by now everybody recognizes him as this rabbi, he begins to teach. Verse 22 says, the people were amazed at his teaching because he taught them as one who had authority, which means that the previous rabbis, even though they taught them, did not teach with the same authority with which Jesus was teaching. There's something different about this rabbi. There's something different about this teacher. There's something different about this Jesus. Is there something different with the content? Yes, there is a lot of difference in the content that Jesus gives. We'll look at that in the coming weeks. There is also a lot of difference in the interpretations that Jesus gives. We'll look at those also in the coming weeks. But here, the interesting thing that the people are catching very intuitively is that he's teaching with authority, which is something that they did not regularly or commonly see in the other rabbis and in the other teachers. Now, I think that's a very important point. That's a big point for us to underline and perhaps pause and ponder. There are several teachers. There are several preachers. Some are very beautiful with their language and eloquence. Some are extremely amazing in their depth and breadth of content. Some are scholarly in their ability to understand the original text and the grammar and whatnot. But there are very few that will teach with authority. Now, teaching with authority does not come with your ability of having grasped the content very well. That is a certain kind of confidence that you will exude if you know the content very well. But authority and confidence are quite different. Now, Jesus' moral life was impeccable, that even his enemies could not point fingers and could not agree on the false testimonies later on that they will bring up. I believe, I certainly do believe, depending on the amount of time that each of us spends with God, depending on the amount of dependence on God, and then also depending on the amount of grasp of the subject and the content, and empowered by the Holy Spirit, and you walking in righteousness, imputed graciously by God, and continuing to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, and being in a right standing with God, there is a kind of an authority that comes out that's difficult to miss. Okay? So that's the kind that perhaps Jesus exuded. So they are saying because he taught them as one who had authority, and they are also contrasting it and saying, not as the teachers of the law. So people are able to make out the difference between a flat teacher and somebody who perhaps experientially and authoritatively knows and has the moral grounds to teach what Jesus taught. A kind of authority that is unmatched. That's very beautiful. Now, again, a few weeks ago, just as a refresher, we looked at the stages of discipleship. And I told you that typically there are 3 stages of discipleship in early Judaism during Jesus' time. The first one is Beit Shefer, the second one is Beit Talmud, and the third one is Beit Midrash. The Beit Shefer is more like, your primary school type of an induction into spirituality and religiosity. The Beit Talmud would be like an elementary school education, and the Beit Midrash was like the higher secondary education, perhaps. Now, what's important is that Jesus, by now, seems to have been recognized as a type of rabbi, believed to have what is called as smikha, or authority to make new interpretations. When somebody entered religious education, they had to go through these 3 levels. I told you a few weeks ago, Beit Shefer, Beit Talmud, and Beit Midrash. After they finished Beit Midrash, they are then to follow a rabbi. And when this person has followed the rabbi satisfactorily for a long time, whatever the time is, there's no number to that, then the rabbis will come together and agree that this guy is now imitated and conformed to the image of the rabbi that he followed. He's understood all the rabbi's teachings. He's understood all his interpretations. Now he is ready to make his own interpretations, and they'll commission him, and then he will become a rabbi. Now, what's happening here is that at this particular point in time, when all of this is happening, Jesus teaching in the synagogue, it seems to be commonly accepted that Jesus has reached this stage of having the authority to make new interpretations. It's like having gone to Bible college and done your BTH, MTH, or MDiv, and then you are doing your doctoral work. And after you have done your doctoral work, you publish your original research in a particular field, then you become, in many ways, quote unquote, an authority on your doctoral topic. So that's the kind of thing that the people are recognizing that Jesus has already achieved. They are understanding that he is a shmikha, or he has reached a rabbinic status of having the authority to make his own new interpretations. And most of the teachers were Torah teachers, who were teachers of the law, who could only teach accepted interpretations. Now, a teacher is very different from a rabbi. A rabbi is at a higher plane. The teacher is only allowed to teach accepted interpretations, perhaps like maybe the one that I am doing. I by no means have any standing authority education to make my own new interpretations. For all you know, I might look at a few scholars and say, this is one position, this is another one, that's another one. Okay, so the teachers were people who could only teach accepted interpretations, but Jesus, being the rabbi, the shmikha, had the authority to make new interpretations. He had the shmikha, the authority. So those with authority today, for example, ordination, let's say, for example, in the Roman Catholic Church, I come from the Roman Catholic Church. I'm not a Roman Catholic anymore, but that's my upbringing. In the Roman Catholic Church, the Pope has the authority to make new interpretations of the text. That becomes a papal edict. That becomes a papal bull. Okay, so he is ordained to, with authority, make new interpretations and pass legal judgments. So the crowds were amazed because Jesus taught with shmikha, with authority, in the Greek with exousia, okay, from where the word exposition or expounding comes from, exegesis. Okay, so Jesus was questioned about his authority later on. Okay, so but here everybody recognizes his shmikha, and that's the background to that. Now, what's interesting here is that in this place of religious gathering, there is a man who is curious about spiritual and religious things. And lo and behold, that man was possessed with a demon. Okay? I don't know if the demon-possessed man came there, impelled by the demon to snoop and smell and see what's happening in the synagogues, and see what teaching Jesus is going to give, or I do not know. But it's very interesting that you find a demon-possessed man in a synagogue. 23 says, just then a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit is crying out. What is he crying out? He is actually crying out something very, very evangelistic and very, very missional. He's saying, what do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Now, how interesting to get a validation and an attestation from the demons themselves. Now, Jesus is on this mission to forever destroy the demons, and with his death on the cross, defeat the evil one. And here, this demon is saying, I know who you are, the Holy One of God. Now, it's important for us to, at this moment, pause and understand the demons also knew who Jesus was. The demons trembled at Jesus. So if you and I know who Jesus is, and we are also trembling with a holy reverence at Jesus, there has to be a distinction between our believing and trembling vis-a-vis the believing and trembling of demons. Yeah, they know it as an intellectual fact, but they do not know it at a relational level. Now, many of us Christians like to park Christianity at an intellectual level, and that's not a good thing. Now, many of us park it at an emotional level. That's not a good thing either. Now, Mark 12:30 says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that is holistic discipleship. And so there has to be an interaction between all of our faculties, and we can't be specialists and super specialists like in medicine and in only certain areas that we are naturally inclined to. So we have to learn to always integrate the mind and the heart, the intellect and the emotion, the will and the work, the body, as it were. So our believing and our trembling has to be very, very different from the belief and the trembling of demons. And it's possible for us to think, why is this demon now trying to make Jesus famous? Now, it's kind of very ironic, but interestingly, if you dig a little deeper, it is to prematurely speeden Jesus's ministry or cause disruption in Jesus's ministry or thwart Jesus's ministry. Last week, if you were with us, you would have seen that opening slide. In the first few slides, I showed you that there is a time period in Jesus's ministry which is called as the period of obscurity. That's roughly the first 1 year. Jesus did not want to be widely known. He was always trying to hush people up, and he would heal somebody and he'll say, see to it that you don't go and tell anybody. Just the opposite of what we do. Yeah, so Jesus was trying to be very discreet, and he did not want to unnecessarily become controversial too early. He was ramping it up gradually, and it crescendoed, as it were, towards, the third year or the 3.5 years. So here, the demon-possessed man saying, I know who you are the Holy One of God, is, mixed. Okay? And I really do not know the purpose why the demon said it, but it does not look like an innocuous, exaltatory confession. Implicit in it is probably the trouble that Jesus would get into if he became too famous too soon and too controversial too soon. Okay. And next, Jesus' reply is classic. 25-26. He says, "Be quiet." Okay, if Jesus were here today, I'm not meaning to be irreverential. I'm not using this word in a irreverential way. He would have used the modern equivalent of just zip up, just shut up, be quiet. And Jesus is saying this sternly, and then he's also saying, "Ship out of him, come out of him, get out of him, shut up and get out." Is in essence what he's saying in modern rendering. And then see what the impure spirit is doing. The impure spirit is shaking the man violently as if to disturb him, bother him one last time, and came out of him with a shriek. Now that's interesting. Okay. The next one, 27, the people were all so amazed that they asked each other, what is this? What is this? A new teaching, and that with authority? And then now he even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him. Now, it's not just authority in the way that he interpreted things or he expounded things or he taught things or he said it with conviction. This authority is also validated in the way that he commands the demons to go out and they obey him. So, what are they seeing? They are seeing things that they don't see in the common teachers of the law. He is preaching and he is practicing. He's preaching, he's practicing. He is a preacher practitioner. Now, when we were in Bombay for about 10 years, we were only part of a full-time teaching ministry. And now, if you know, I have my own spine physio clinic. And so cheekily, when I go to places and people ask me how to introduce you, I say, tell them that I am a preacher practitioner. Preacher practitioner, of course, preaching the Bible and practicing, spine physio. But then Jesus was a preacher practitioner. Not just empty words, preaching, practicing, because that is what the Old Testament prophets testified of him, that he will preach and teach and come with signs and wonders. Okay, interesting. Next, 28, news about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Okay, so Jesus' visibility and reach, two important words in today's social media world, in today's digital world. Visibility and reach, visibility and reach. How do we become visible? How does this ministry become visible? Okay, you like and you share. You like and you share. You subscribe and you tell others. Here, what's happening is news about him is spreading quickly over the whole region of Galilee. Not just because of the wonders that he was doing, but also with the authority with which he was teaching. He was becoming very soon the talk of the town, the talk of this town. The next one, quickly, episode 35 of the 250 is that he is a compassionate healer. Now, this is one event that features in all the synoptic gospels. It's there in Matthew, it's there in Mark, it's there in Luke. Now, I chose the Lucan narrative because Luke is a medical doctor and this narrative is about healing. So I was curious to see how Luke is rendering this narrative to us. And then, you can always go back and read the Matthean and the Markan narrative as well. Now, Jesus, the compassionate healer, the compassionate healer. Now, what's happening here? 38, Peter and Andrew, brothers. Now, here what's happening in verse 38 is Jesus left the synagogue and then he walks to the home of Simon, his new disciple. Now, Simon, I told you 18 is the age of marriage in Jewish tradition and custom. So Simon obviously is married. Simon has a mother-in-law. And Simon's mother-in-law was suffering from a high fever. Okay, very interesting. It's only Luke, the physician, who can say that it is a high fever. Generally, anybody else would have written fever. Now, he is interestingly saying was suffering from a high fever. And they asked Jesus to help her. Okay, help her, not heal her. So he bent over her and rebuked the fever. Now that's very interesting. That's actually embarrassing for a physician to say. Now, Luke, the physician, knows that fever can't be rebuked. The fever has to be treated. The temperature has to be brought down, maybe some, sponging, whatever. But you can't rebuke a fever. I'm sure Luke never in his medical practice rebuked any fever. Now he would have lost this practice altogether. Now, but he is very clearly and very intentionally, even as a physician, without being embarrassed about using this word, he's saying he rebuked the fever and it left her. Now you're hearing it from the horse's mouth, as it were. A physician is saying the fever was rebuked, and maybe for days, or maybe, he quizzed Jesus, or Peter rather. Okay. What am I saying? No, I'm just, I think, getting fatigued. So I'm forgetting this is Luke. Okay. So I'm thinking it's Mark. This is Luke. Okay. So Luke, the physician, is basically saying that Jesus rebuked the fever, and that as a result of the rebuke, the fever left her. That's not a valid medical thing that a physician can write, but he still writes it because he believes it is true, and he knows that it is true. Then he says, she got up at once. Now, at once is important. And not just participated in whatever happened, she actually became active and waited on them. So there is no fatigue, there is no tiredness, there is no malaise. She is instantly gathered strength, she's instantly revived, and she is serving everybody that's come home. So I call this as the mill miracle, the mother-in-law miracle. The next one is the healing ministry of Jesus, verse 40. At sunset, the people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sickness. And laying his hands on each one, he healed them. That's very beautiful. That's very beautiful. The compassionate healer, Jesus, has spent time in the synagogue, and perhaps he wanted to, like most of us on a Sunday afternoon, or here in this case, it's a Saturday afternoon, he perhaps would have just wanted to be quiet, contemplative, because you are not allowed to do anything on the Sabbath. You are not required to do anything on the Sabbath. But here, Jesus, when people are being brought, okay, at sunset, technically the Sabbath is over. That's the emphasis there. The people brought to Jesus all who had various kinds of sicknesses, and he laid his hands on each one of them. That's again a very, very interesting observation by Luke the physician. He's saying he laid his hands. Earlier he rebuked, now he is laying hands. And he healed them all, or laid hands on each one and healed them all. That's beautiful. The next one, very quickly, we have another 10 minutes, is verse 41, deliverance ministry, quote unquote. Moreover, demons came out of many people shouting, you are the Son of God. Now you know, the demons not trying to be evangelistic. The demons perhaps are panicking, they are nervous, but, they just want to do one wicked favor for Jesus before they actually leave, and they are saying you are the Son of God, not to make him popular, okay, but to perhaps prematurely create trouble and controversy for him. But he is not thanking them for introducing his true worship to the people. He is rebuking them. And interesting, he would not allow them to speak because he is in the period of obscurity still. Okay. He would not allow them to speak because they knew he was the Messiah. So Jesus was not waiting for validation. He's not hoping somebody, would recognize that he is the Messiah. Yes, of course, he wanted to tell everybody that he is the Messiah and for them to understand that he is one. But he's like, no thanks, not from demons. No thanks, not too early. No thanks, not from people too prematurely. It'll happen, but there are so many more things that I have to do to establish my messiahship in the right way that the people will understand and not prematurely celebrate me as a political messiah and create trouble for me by pitting me against the rulers of the day. So demons are coming out and people, and they are shouting and they are telling who Jesus was, but Jesus is rebuking them all and he is not allowing them to speak. Now I've been up close working and seeing deliverance ministry as it has been done by people in different places. Many people take many examples of Jesus' style of deliverance and try to create their own eisegesis or wrong interpretations or readings into that. Uh, Now, in deliverance ministry, I think certain deliverance ministers, I not really like to use this phrase because any ministry in its deepest sense is deliverance ministry because we are in the business of delivering people from darkness to light, from sin to sanctification, from death to life, and we are delivering people. We are delivering people from the pits of hell, as it were. It's not only that when we deliver somebody from a demon possession that we are doing deliverance. So I don't like using this term in the popular way it's used, but I'm just using it here to illustrate a larger context. Okay. So in deliverance ministry, as I have seen it, there are people that say, you know what, Jesus is conversing with these demons. And, so we also will ask 2 questions and what is your name and this and that and all of that. Now, unfortunately, they choose from some particular narrative that they want to imitate. Okay, they're not looking at scriptures from cover to cover and trying to understand that you don't even have to give so much of importance and value to the demons, so much so that you want to ask their name, their address, and their PIN code and all of that. You don't even have to ask what kind of a spirit. And, people, if you've read certain books from certain people that have done deliverance ministry for years, they would say, this is the spirit of this, that is the spirit of that, and blah, 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 blah. But all of those are really not validated scripturally. Okay. And therefore, to converse with demons and to learn demonology through demon confession, when you know that the devil is the father of lies, how can you then create a theological framework or a framework for demonology from demon confessions? Are they going to tell you the truth? Okay, so I don't think we need to get into all this rigmarole, and for the most part, I think we have to keep it rooted in the scripture, keep it clear and plain, and the main things are the plain things, and the plain things are the main things. Yeah, right. Finally, very quickly, episode 36 of 250 Galilee Outreach. This is again in all the synoptics, and I've chosen Matthew 4:23 to 25. Very quickly, let's take a look at that. 23 says, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness among the people. So he is teaching in their synagogues. So he is a teacher. He is proclaiming the good news. He is a preacher slash evangelist. And he is healing every disease and sickness among the people. So he is a healer. Okay. Now, again, here, when it says he is healing every disease and sickness, people say, oh, yes, according to this text, every disease and sickness ought to be healed and ought to be healed instantly and in this fashion. But there are instances in the gospel where Jesus goes to places where the people do not have any interest in the person of Jesus, save alone in the works of Jesus. And it says that Jesus did not do many miracles in that place. One is their lack of interest and their lethargy and their lack of faith. Two is they had no inclination to discover the Messiah that he was. And signs and wonders were only attesting to the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah about the Messiah, that he will come healing and setting the captives free. And so when he did that, the people in the olden times were like, oh, we are looking for somebody with an identity marker of healing and delivering and working miracles and doing signs and wonders. So whoever did that, they would look at all of them as the potential Messiah. And so Jesus came doing that. And so in certain areas, when he went where they had no desire in discovering that Jesus is the Messiah, Jesus really did not have to do any signs and wonders. Okay, then 24, news about him spread all over Syria. Syria is a foreign country now. Okay, so Jesus is not just confined to Galilee, he's going beyond the borders. News about him is going beyond the borders. And people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain. Okay, severe pain medicine, various diseases. Let's call it as general medicine, suffering severe pain medicine, demon possessed, those having seizures, neurology that is, and the paralyzed. Okay, physical medicine and rehabilitation perhaps, and he healed them. So Jesus' fame is spreading across the borders, multi-centric. Okay, people are coming perhaps also from different places, multi-specialty. Okay, he is treating all kinds. Today in hospitals, typically we have a specialist for a particular disorder or a disease. Now Jesus is taking everybody on. Now 25, large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, to the east side of the Jordan River, the 10 cities, Decapolis, Jerusalem from the south, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. So his visibility and his reach are increasing. He is expanding. And then we move into his active phase of the ministry, which is his second year of missions. Okay, I'm going to stop here. And oh, wow, it's 8:30. Okay, so let's take questions, comments. If anybody has been reading these passages in the parallel versions, please enlighten us and tell us, nuances that we have missed. Okay, anybody, any thoughts, any comments, any pushbacks? Yes.
So we've been doing Mark, the same parallel, the parallel passage in Mark.
Yes,
calling of the
yes,
calling of the disciples. One of the things we were thinking about is considering that fishing. So there could be many reasons why Simon, Andrew, James, and John
James and John.
join Jesus. One of the big things
Mhm,
one of the things you have to remember, there is also a kind of a hierarchy in Jewish culture. With if
mhm,
you see it later, if you see Acts, how they talk about how they talk about Peter, how the people talk
mhm,
about Peter saying that he's uneducated, he is lower standard.
mhm,
So for
mhm,
them, we were thinking that there could be. I mean, we obviously it is a great honor to be called by
mhm.
a rabbi.
Rabbi.
There is also this whole thing that there is this opportunity to better yourselves by moving up other things. So I think
Oh,
that could be also a good reason why they would have moved. And they would have immediately seen, because
possible.
it's also, if you look at this, I'm purely guessing from how we.
Speculative. Yeah,
If you look
yeah,
at
yeah.
Mark's section, Jesus has already been teaching a little while, teaching and preaching a
Mm,
little while before he comes and calls these
mm,
guys. And
mhm.
and because Mark is so brief in the way he talks, I'm assuming there is definitely Jesus already has a reputation of being somebody who preaches. So I
Right.
think Simon and Andrew jumped at the opportunity, like you said.
Opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, among other things, you cannot
Possible.
because
Possible. That's one way of looking at it. Yeah.
also when we make decisions, we do not make decisions based on a single reason. Normally, it is a amalgamation of different reasons, aspirations, beliefs, feeling.
True.
So I think that also could have contributed to the thing, because we do know, if you look at Peter's future in the Gospels, he is known for jumping into things, known for saying things without thinking, known for things. So I'm assuming this is part of his uh,
Okay.
personality. And then considering that James and John also are called sons of thunder, which I think I'm saying
Impulsive. Hmm.
they also come across. So I mean, so I'm assuming that is a part of their personality also would have pulled it into it. This is just another perspective of it. Obviously,
Perspective.
and the biggest thing I'm
It's multi.
yeah, it is multimodal in the way you look at the uh, uh, whatever their uh, whatever the reasons they had to join. And definitely it's an up it is
Hmm.
it's a big, if you think about it, in the rabbis would eventually be part of the council, or they would be part of the decision making of any kind of town. They would be given a lot of importance. So
Hmm.
it's a no brainer. Why would you
Hmm. Hmm.
mentioned it, no? The IIT IIMs, why people join? Because influence, money, power. So those are the three things. So I
So
mean,
it's a very lucrative offer that they couldn't refuse.
yes,
Huh?
yes. I mean,
Okay.
other things. I mean,
Sure.
we can make it very uh, holy reasons, and I mean very religious reasons.
Yeah. Yeah.
But people don't function in that single dimension. They always function multiple reasons. And so
Right.
something which came out, we thought was that's probably an also a good way to look at it.
Well, yeah, yeah, it is. It is. And it's interesting. And I'm glad that you brought this perspective. But we can't be very dogmatic about it. We can definitely be speculative. And we need to consider. We're not trying to present them as holy
Obviously,
people that immediately responded to the call, obviously. Another thing, another angle that people say is that in the town of Galilee, around the Sea of Galilee, fishing was a very thriving business. So there are some people that build a case for how prosperous, Peter and Andrew and James and John could have been. They are not like, nobodies that are struggling for their next meal. They are like business owners.
there is one difference I see between this is something where I thought about. So if as a fisherman, the best
Mm,
possible solution to fish is to have a boat. Okay, and you
mhm,
read Mark, it's talking about how Peter and Andrew were fishing from the shore. How many people fish from the shore when they don't have access to a boat? Or they are so there is a disparity in finances, because it says James and John were with their father on a boat. When they left him with the other people who were working.
Men.
There is a big disparity. So fishermen, if you look at it, will always choose the best possible solution. I kind of fish, so I know at least this we choose. So so that is a good way of looking at there. So I suspect Simon and Andrew were actually on the lower side of.
Oh, really? Okay.
Just because of that sentence, because fishing from shore is not a good idea. You need to walk into the water at like chest level and then throw a thing, which is very difficult. Throwing a net in and knowing the Sea of Galilee, and you said it's a fishing village. There are definitely a lot of other people also going to be there, so it's not very easy to fish from shore. So that would definitely contribute to the idea that they could be on the lower side of the economic scale when it comes to a fisherman. Not so
Okay.
though.
Okay, but wouldn't that be assuming too much from just
Could be
one little statement? Yeah. So definitely, these are all good observations. These are all healthy observations, and unless you do a doctorate on this passage, okay, we will not take your interpretation authoritatively. But then, yes, it's no. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So, but it's an interesting observation. It's an interesting observation. Yeah. Good. Right. Anybody else? Any other comments? Any other questions?
Yes,
Inputs?
brother, one reason
Yes.
I would like to think of when regarding the age, at the age of 30, Jesus started his ministry. So you told that there are certain hierarchy, like some discipleship of
Stages.
Judaism, like
Stages. Yes.
stages
Yes.
like Bel Sefer, Bel Talmud, or the third was something like that.
Yes.
So at the age of 30, one was or have the authority to preach. So is that the reason Jesus
Correct.
started his ministry? Is that the only reason,
Correct.
or any other reason we can count on?
That is the main reason. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes. Anybody else? Any other questions, clarifications, comments, pushbacks? All good? Okay. So what are some takeaways, if I may? What are some takeaways from today's portion? We looked at Jesus' call. We looked at Jesus, the authoritative teacher. We looked at Jesus, the compassionate healer. We looked at how Jesus' ministry was ramping up and word was spreading around. So, as disciples of Jesus today, any personal applications, anything that appealed to you, spoke to you, that you want to take home?
I really
Anything at all?
I
Yes.
really like that authority the section on authority. The explanation you gave us, that is superb. Authority coming from a personal and close relationship with Christ, and from living righteously. I think that's kind of a summary that you said, right? And that is so important. And that's something jumped out at me. So I'm really.
Wow. Thank you for that. And that's something that's very important. We can try to sound authoritative. We can fake being authoritative, but true authority will just be evident to others. And I think that is something that will flow out of your real connection and plugging in with the Father on a daily basis.
Yes, yes.
Yes, there's some comment which I'm not able to read from my phone. If somebody can read that for me.
As a physician myself, Matthew 4:24 is such a lovely reminder that it is
Mhm.
so glad for me to be an intern under the greatest physician, Deepa Chakola.
Okay, okay. Hi, Deepa. Yes, yes. That it is good to be a intern.
Under the greatest physician.
Okay, that's very nice. That's very nice. Very interesting. The interface between health and spirituality is something that's very fascinating to me. And modern medicine obviously will scoff at certain things that Luke has entered as a physician, that he rebuked the fever and the fever left Peter's mother-in-law. They're like, I mean, like, isn't this enough to know that you're all a bunch of intellectually suicidal people or whatever? That's what the skeptics would say. But actually, there is a lot of interaction between health, spirituality, emotions, many of which are beyond the scope of the understanding of modern medicine. But there's also a very fine line that we need to tread. We can't spiritualize everything that is physical or biochemical. And we can't also make everything that is spiritual biochemical or just physical. These are two very complex entities, and these entities are not standalone. They kind of interact, and it is fascinating to even think of these interactions, and very little work is done in this domain. So maybe, Deepa, you should take up something like this and try and see if you can bring some more weight into these passages as a physician. Yeah.
I also think
Yes.
I think that this is an extension to Jesus' authority being shown, authority over sickness, over. If you look at Mark,
Yes.
authority
Yes.
over. So he talks about authority over the animals, because it's very specifically. This is the only Mark only mentions wild
Hmm.
animals. Only
Hmm.
place where it's mentioned wild animals and angels.
Yes.
So authority over them, then authority to preach good news.
Yes.
Authority to call disciples is another very big thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Then impure spirit, another authority. Then
Hmm.
healing of so I think there's a very clear. At least Mark does because I'm a little biased because I'm doing Mark. So
Mark. Yeah. It's helpful. It's helpful to know that perspective. Yeah. Go on. Yeah.
yeah, so
Authority over nature. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
everything,
Wind
including
and the waves, they obey him. Yeah. Yeah.
so so I
Hmm.
think that's a good perspective. Also, very clearly showing the God, Jesus is God, especially it's because in the
Of
beginning.
proving Jesus' divinity, in a very systematic way. Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Yes. Yes. Good. Very nice. Interesting. Anybody else? Anything else? Any takeaways? Any personal learnings that could be useful for us? Anything that you are
Hi,
going
sir.
away
Good
with?
evening.
Good evening. Good evening. May I know who this is?
Dennis here. Dennis.
Dennis. Yes, Dennis. Yeah, Dennis. Dennis again. Yeah. Medical professional. Yes, Dennis. Speak into it. Preach
Uh,
it, brother.
Sir,
Yeah.
it's a very exhilarating moment when Jesus calls you to be fishers of men. But
Uh,
I think counting the cost is something that we
yeah.
forget to do.
Yes. Yes.
Ultimately, it takes a lot of toll and large amount of self control.
Sacrifice. Yeah. Yes. Dennis, we lost you. Are you able to hear me?
Plus a lot of discipline, plus time being taking in from.
Yes.
So it's a very good line to tell to people when we are calling them for ministry, but I think we should always
Yeah.
also caution and warn them from the beginning itself that it is not an easy job or journey to take, and there is a lot of
Embark
cost
upon.
involved in it. Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes. Dennis, do you want to give the others a little background into what you do so they understand the context?
Sir, we are just moving around, so we are doing a lot of moving around, but we are into after our MEPS from Vellore. When my wife did physiotherapy from Vellore, after that we got married and we were working in Manali for 6 years in at Lady Wellington Hospital. After that, we moved on to from Manali. We moved on to Chhattisgarh after doing our post graduations again. And then from
Hmm.
Chhattisgarh, now we have moved to Kolar. Now we are in Kolar in another
Oh, is
mission
it?
hospital. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, we are still working in the missions, and we hope to continue till Lord calls us to do the work that He has called us to do.
Yes. So when Dennis and Cheryl say that, emphasis on counting the cost should be placed, I understand where they are coming from. Now, it's often very easy in mission conferences and all of that to call people, but the cost of discipleship also needs to be told. So we can't be very discreet and keep it under wraps. And then when they come in and they say surprise, surprise. So so that's what he is trying to say. Now, even when you prepare people, Dennis, for the cost of discipleship and they sign up, there will always be something that will come up which is challenging, which, we never would have been able to preempt or foresee. And that's the Christian journey, whether we are called into full time ministry, preaching, teaching, healing, whatever. I think when we come to Jesus itself, and sign up to be disciples, not as ministers, we need to be told that coming to Jesus is not all going to be flowery and hunky dory, and there is a cost too. Discipleship, and the primary thing is that you should be willing to die to yourself and do that repetitively. Very difficult, easily said than done. But thank you for sharing that, Dennis. You guys have moved to Kolar now, is it?
Yes, sir. Yes,
KGF?
sir. We are at Kolar. Yes, sir.
Oh, that's interesting. Closer to us.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All
Yes,
the
sir.
best.
So
All the
I
best.
just wanted to add that it's not only that we have flows all the time, but we get moments of real true clarity with Him, being with Him during our working in during our work itself. So there
Yes.
is always plus and minus, but there are minuses, but there are way more pluses, and I think we are counting where we are going, and we are looking forward and ahead, and we are not looking back. And I'm not
Sure.
saying that we should tell people, but that's I
Discourage
think that's
people.
one
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. Yeah.
reason when people come to mission and then they find that what they thought were going to be always a high, they do not find
Hmm.
that, and a lot of people just get waylaid. So
Right.
I think that's when we call them, we have to actually tell them, prepare them that yeah, there
Hmm.
are going to be periods of low, but uh, the
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
closeness that you feel all the time is something else.
Hmm. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Yes. It's a beautiful journey. And it's not an easy journey, but it's an important journey, a delightful journey, and heaven knows the impact that we have. Yeah. Thanks, Dennis. Yes. Any other comments? Anybody else? If there's nothing much, shall I ask Sister Mani Megalai, ma'am, if you're there, would you mind closing for us with a word of prayer?
Yeah, I'll pray. Yeah.
Yeah.
Heavenly Father,
Thank you.
thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity of getting to know you more and more deeper. What your attributes are, what is your personality, what your heart is, O my Master Lord, into what you look into, O my Master Lord. Thank you so much. Thank you for today's lesson also, and for all the participants. Thank you so much for this wonderful time, O Master Lord. Lord, forgive us in case we have failed to really concentrate in a deeper way, to understand in a better way. But Lord, please help us, enable us that we will, Lord, get to know you more in a deeper way, O Master Lord. Thank you for the organizers, for the Lord, for bringing out so much clearly the thoughts from the Master Lord, and for the Q&A session also, which brought about quite a lot of enlightenment. Oh God, thank you so much. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity. Week after week, help us, oh God, to assemble like this, to get to know you better. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, ma'am. Lovely having you all, and we'll meet you all next week. Bye bye. God bless.